The Candlemaker's Secret. Elorin Brightlea stepped into evening with the easy steadiness he had brought back from the field of endless pillows, the soft tuition of that meadow still lingering in his muscles and breath, and the tower of Wistmere breathed with him as he closed the door behind, the latch answering his touch with a quiet click like a cup settling onto a saucer. And across the river the village roofs carried the last light as if balancing warm plates, and a mild fragrance of beeswax and bread drifted along the lane, the scent of homes finishing their daytime sentences and turning the page toward night. And Master Aldrin had nodded toward the village at supper and said only that Elorin should keep his eyes open for small tasks that wished to be done, not because they could not be left, but because they enjoyed being noticed, and Elorin took this advice the way he took a piece of fruit for a pocket journey, simple and sweet and enough, and he crossed the stone bridge where moss polished the edges of each block and paused to watch the river carry the sky as if it were a folded cloth, then followed the lane where windows held back their curtains with contentment, where doorsteps had been swept and set to rest, where a single broom leaned as if it knew it would be asked to dance again tomorrow. And on the far side of the square a little shop cast a honey light upon the cobbles, and above its door hung a simple sign carved with a flame and a cup, and within the window were rows upon rows of candles that shone without flicker though no one stood near to tend them. And Elorin pressed his palms to the glass to see more clearly, and the glass warmed his skin as though greeting a familiar. And a voice from within said to come in, child, for you have arrived exactly on time, which is the only way anyone truly arrives. And the bell over the door did not ring, it sighed, and the room smelled of bees and light and linen cupboards, of rosemary hung to dry and of sweet smoke that had chosen to be memory rather than haze. And an old man stood behind the counter, narrow-shouldered and bright-eyed, his hair as soft and bright as thistledown, his hands steady in a way that made all the shelves stand straighter. And he wore an apron patched with squares of cloth the color of candle ends, cream and amber and pale plum. And when he smiled, Elorin felt that here was an artisan the night itself liked to visit. And the old man introduced himself simply as the maker, saying that names can become tired if used for too many years without a rest. And he invited Elorin to step closer and look, to listen with his nose as well as his ears. For good candles are made as much from breath and patience as from wax and wick. And there were molds and bowls of clear pebbled beeswax that glowed like captured sunbeams, spools of wick loosely braided from linen, washed in bowls of moon-pooled water, small bottles of oils pressed from herbs that had overheard lullabies, and smooth stones gathered from a bend in the river where fish prefer to linger, because a finished candle should remember not to rush. And the shelves held tapers as slim as reed stalks and pillars as round as loaves and small cup candles poured into clay that looked as if it had been listening while it was formed, and each flame burned with a steady poise that did not bully the air, and beneath each flame the wax remained whole, not melting, the surface untroubled, as if the light were feeding on something else entirely, something stored within like a seed stores spring. And Elorin reached his hand near and felt warmth without heat. And the maker nodded with pleasure and said, "These are the lights that do not consume the body that holds them, and each carries a single wish waiting to be released by the one who knows how to see. And they are not cans to be opened or puzzles to be solved. They are simply small homes for hope. And hope likes to be invited out with good manners." And Elorin bowed because it felt correct. And the old man laughed softly and told him that tonight would be a night for learning with the hands, for there are lessons in wait and pour and patience that no page can carry. And he set a little pot upon a block that gave off steadiness instead of heat, and into the pot he placed a measure of beeswax and a curl of bay and a single droplet of a thing he called river breath, gathered in morning at the bend where the mist chooses to sit on the stones. And as the wax softened, it gave off a fragrance that tasted of bright kitchens and of paper ready for ink. And he taught Elorin how to measure wick with the respect due to a bridge, how to braid 3 threads so they do not forget one another, how to anchor the braid at the base with a pebble and tie it at the crown with a loop so the flame would know where to live. And he showed how to pour with the weight of slow rain rather than the haste of a spill, how to keep a still hand and an open heart so the cup would accept the gift. And the boy watched, practiced, and watched again. And in the long listening that good work asks of the body, he felt the field of endless pillows rise in his memory as a tutor of rhythm. And he poured in time with his own breath until the surface of the wax lay smooth as lake water at dawn. And while the cups set, the maker asked Elorin to carry a tray of finished candles to the back room where a long table waited like a pier for boats. And the boy did so with both hands and found that the tray shifted its balance to keep him honest, tilting just enough to make him pay attention and then steadying when his attention was true. And in the back room the air was dimmer and kinder still, and along the walls hung small maps that were not maps of streets but of needs. The path to a widow's kitchen where the tea caddy had gone empty, the route to a gate that stuck each evening and made tired hands wrestle with it, the way to a schoolroom where a latch had been repaired but not yet thanked, the corner where a stray dog slept with one ear folded under because no one had ever smoothed it flat. And these were the maker's deliveries, he said when he joined Elorin at the table. Not orders from customers but invitations from the town itself. And tonight you shall be my assistant if you wish. And Elorin wished with his whole heart. And the maker wrapped 3 candles in soft paper and placed them in a basket lined with cloth, tucked a small brush and a pot of oil between them, added a folded cloth and a bit of twine, and set a little square of cake on top as if the basket were a lunch pail for the evening. And he said, "We deliver light, but we also deliver what light allows, which is the seeing of what needs doing and the doing of it as if we had planned to all along." And they stepped into the square and found the night so clear that every stone counted itself aloud, and the basket seemed to grow lighter with each footstep, either because the street enjoyed being useful or because the boy was learning the proper way to carry kindness. And their first stop was a narrow house beside the lane where a window kept fogging no matter how often it was wiped. And within that room sat an old weaver whose loom leaned politely against a wall and whose kettle wheezed as if it had walked up a hill. And the maker set a candle upon a saucer near the window, and the flame rose like a small friend standing to greet a guest. And Elorin took the cloth from the basket and wiped the pane, not quickly but with the same patient pattern he had used on wax. And from beneath the candle a faint warmth spread into the cup and then into the air. And the window did not mist again, and the old weaver smiled without teeth and thanked the boy as if he had mended a torn place in a long story. And the candle showed a brief picture in its heart. A child setting a shuttle into a little loom long ago. And Elorin knew without being told that it was the old woman's wish to see hands making again. And that wish had been held in the flame until the sight of the boy's hand polishing in circles was enough to release it. And they bowed and went on, and at a gate that stuck each night. They set a second candle, and Elorin used the brush to nudge oil into the hinge while the maker talked to the wood in the tone one uses when asking a chair to scoot over. And the gate listened because wood keeps every conversation it has ever had. And when the boy lifted and settled the latch, the bar slid into place like a boat into its slip. And in the heart of that flame there appeared for a moment an image of two hands meeting at that very gate long years ago. One hand carrying a basket of wash, the other a book. And though the faces were not shown, the boy felt the ease and affection in the hands. And he saw how kindness polishes places until they glow of their own accord. And a schoolroom kept too much shadow at the back, and the children's attention tired there each afternoon. And the maker placed a candle upon the shelf and asked Elorin to pull the desk a little from the wall and brush a line of chalk dust into his palm rather than onto the floor. And the flame rose, and in it a wish trembled like a moth and then passed into the room, a wish for a voice to be heard. And the room accepted it as if it had been waiting under a cloth. And in the quiet that followed they returned to the work table, warmed a little cup of wax, set a short braided wick, and Elorin breathed a wish for his small actions to carry light where he could not go. And the cup answered with a hush he felt along his fingertips. And when the traveler's light had set, the maker lifted the little vial he kept for such moments, rolled it once between his palms and broke the seal. And inside was a powder so faint Elorin would have missed it if he had not learned to notice such things. And the old man told him these dusts gather at the edges of wishes when they pass from rooms into roads, and one may keep a pinch to season a new light so that it remembers it belongs to a family. And he tapped the faint dust upon the wick, and the traveler's light accepted it with a breath that made all the shelves respond like a chord does when the next note joins. And then the maker dimmed the room by the smallest degree and asked Elorin to light his cup. And the boy set flint to striker and called for spark without hurrying. And when the flame stood he felt it like the arrival of a friend who has come in through the kitchen door with a loaf under one arm. And the light did not bite the air, it sang very softly. And if a listener had not been still, that listener would have missed the song. And into that song Elorin poured the memory of the pillows that taught his bones to loosen, and he poured the patience of the gate that now opened on the first try. And he poured the wish for rooms to be kinder. And the traveler's light stood without flicker and grew not taller but truer, which is how true things grow. And the maker wrapped the cup in cloth and set it in a wooden sleeve carved with a star and a reed, and closed the sleeve with a cord that had a bead like a small moon. And the old man then showed Elorin a shelf of lights waiting for delivery, and asked whether the boy would carry one more stop on his way home. And Elorin agreed, so the maker placed in his hands a modest clay cup with a flame that leaned toward him like a tilted ear, and said, "This one is for the stair of your tower. For I have heard that a boy has promised to turn his pages more slowly." And Elorin grinned, for he knew which ears had carried the news. And he thanked the maker with a bow that came from his knees up rather than from his shoulders down. And the bell sighed again as he stepped into the square. And the night had settled so sweetly that the chimney smoke lay flat like shawls across the roofs, and his footsteps made that pleasing hush that cobbles like to make for careful travelers. And he walked toward Wistmere with the clay cup cupped in both hands, and the traveler's light tucked in the satchel against his ribs. And somewhere above the owl drew a line between distant sleepers with its soft wings, and somewhere behind the candle maker set a new wick and poured with the patience of moss. And Elorin crossed the bridge, and the river lifted its surface as if to see who bore such mild brightness, and the fish below arranged themselves in a punctuation that meant welcome. And he passed the orchard where leaves shifted like tidy pages, and slipped through the gate that loved to be touched by a polite hand. And he climbed the stair with the candle held level, and halfway up he paused because the stone there often grew cool and a little lonely at night. And he set the clay cup upon the step, and the flame leaned toward the wall and rested there like a cheek against a shoulder. And he laid his palm upon the stone and felt its thank you as the water beneath buildings expresses its thanks by rounding hard thoughts into smoother ones. And in the study he set the traveler's light upon the sill near the bowl of water that the night liked to sip, and he lifted the board to greet the harp in its pocket under the floor, and played a line not to show what he had learned but to let the room hear what it already knew, that small acts make a long music. And the flame answered by standing a little closer to its wick, the way a child stands closer to a parent at the end of a day. And Elorin laughed softly and felt the tower remember the laughter and set it with care. And he drew his blanket smooth and lay upon the bed with the river breath moving in his chest and the field of endless pillows still tutoring his shoulders. And as his eyes closed he thought of the old weaver and the latch and the chalk line and the fairy rope and the baker's door and the many places that had received a small gift that was not needed and yet was needed. And the traveler's light watched the boy not with the gaze of a guard but with the companionship of a lamp that has always known the way to morning. And he slept, and in his sleep he dreamed that he was pouring from a cup into another cup without either ever becoming empty. And the dream smiled at itself because it recognized a truth. And in the morning the flame still stood, and the tower felt newly at ease. And when Elorin set the small cup upon the stair, he sensed the stone grow kinder. And he understood that the candle maker's secret was not a trick but a way of moving through the world, adding without taking, and he carried that way with him as he slept, while the river folded the sky and the village dreamed in the tender hush before day. And before he closed his eyes he touched the wooden sleeve of his traveler's light and felt the smooth grain answer his fingers like a soft chord, and he promised the stair and the river and the roofs and the little shop that tomorrow he would move at the same measured pace, carrying brightness the way a cup carries water without spilling.